Hey guys, this is Mike from Craft Beer Storm, your host, and also owner, founder, brewer at Barrel Brewing Company in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. We have an extra special guest on today. We have Jack from Jack's Abbey. I was able to get an interview with him, and I was like, wow, I'm going to interview Jack. So we had a great conversation about the area and beer and some challenges, and but good stuff. So let's go. Hey guys, it's Mike here. We have a special guest. We have Jack of Jack's Abbey. Jack, how you doing?
Great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Yeah. So I'm glad you took the time to talk to me and Craft Beer Storm, and spread the word about Jack's Abbey to everybody out there. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting us on.
Oh, awesome. But I wanted to start out, and usually I start out with everybody like this, like your story, how you got started in the beer business, your beginnings and how it grew to where you are now. You have a huge facility now, and you're all over the place. So it'd be great to just learn about that and your whole story.
So a little bit about our story is I started this brewery with my two brothers, Sam and Eric, back in 2011. I had been brewing for about 6 years professionally before we decided to open our own brewery. And the story of the brewery really goes back further than that. When my brothers and I grew up in a family business, my father, uncle, and grandfather ran an ice distribution facility in New York. And so we kind of grew up in a family business, and had, at one point, we all planned on going into that business, but that business is no longer in the family, and instead my brothers and I decided to start Jack's Abbey back in 2011.
Awesome. What part of New York were you in?
We were just north of New York City in Westchester County.
Oh my God, I'm from Westchester. What town were you in?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, the ice plant was in Mamaroneck. It was right off of Mamaroneck Ave,
right,
or a block off of Mamaroneck
Yeah, I grew
Ave.
up in Eastchester and lived in Yonkers a little bit, and all my family's still there. Actually, I never knew that. Interesting. Yeah.
Our biggest account was in Eastchester, the Beverage Mart. They
oh, you did? That's right up the street.
Yeah.
That's so funny, huh? My God. And I'm up in New Hampshire now, and you're like, you have this massive brewery, and we both came from pretty much the same area. That's awesome. Yeah, you never know. But I'm sorry. And then, so you had the ice business, and then from there, what happened?
After college, after I graduated from school, I decided to go into the beer business, and I got a internship, which turned into a full-time job, and went to brewing school. It's a program between Siebel in Chicago and Doemens in Munich. And after a few more years of brewing professionally is when my brothers were able at that point to join me. They were 21. They were of age and ready to either graduated or ready to finish school, and had the time to join me in the brewery venture. Cool.
And you said that I guess you went to Siebel, right? So, and part of it that you trained in Munich, right? I guess that's where the whole lager thing came from.
Well, that's certainly part of it. I mean, there was a lot of Americans, and I'm sure that 95% of the other Americans are still probably focusing on ales. It wasn't necessarily saying teaching you how to make lagers versus ales, but it was just something that I certainly enjoyed when I was in Munich for that course, was trying a lot of those beers. And being in Munich was certainly, even before the class, was one of my first revealing, but one of my first great beer experiences was drinking beer at the Hoffer House and sort of guided my thought on beer even before that.
Wow. Yeah, I love German beer. It's awesome. I went to Oktoberfest once. It was awesome. I got to figure out a way to get back there. But
Oktoberfest was a little crazy. I was just there a few weeks ago.
Oh, you were? It's
awesome. I have
awesome.
to say, it was the first. I've been to Germany quite a few times at this point. That's the first time I've been to Oktoberfest.
Oh my God!
It is quite the event.
It's so good. There's just these ladies with these massive, like these big pint, like liters of beer, and they just come with like 10 of them, and then just slam them on the table. And another lady has like chickens, like cooked chickens, and like bread and sausages, and it's crazy, but it's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to go to a place where the only way you can drink beer is a liter at a time.
That's right.
And it's frowned upon to get less of that.
Oh my God! But that's the whole culture is around beer. I mean, it's like kind of the Italians are around wine. I'm Italian, so my parents are from Italy, so. But the German part is I love going there, and just the beer is delicious. They know what they're doing. So I use a lot of German malts in our beer as well. The Weimar malts, and good stuff. So you were in Germany, and then
as far as the brewery is concerned. We opened in 2011, so that was about 3 years after I went to school in Munich. And when we opened, it was 2011. It's every time I tell it, I tell the story a lot, and it gets funnier every time I say it, because in 2011 we thought the beer market was oversaturated, and that we were worried we were getting in a little too late into the game, and we really wanted to stand out with the beers. We were concerned that if we brewed IPA, that we would get lost in the shuffle of the 3,000 breweries that there were at the time. And which is the reason I think that's so funny is we now have 7,000, and by all accounts we're going to have 10,000 breweries in the next year or two. So we were pretty incorrect on the market saturation when we opened in 2011, and I don't probably a question you'll ask later is where do I think the industry is going. I've been wrong for 7 years now. I keep thinking that there's going to be a shakeout. We're at saturation point, but maybe we're not. We'll have to see on that front. But going back to the point on the lager side is we really wanted to brew lagers. We wanted to focus on lagers, and for us, it was a way to really differentiate the products that we were going to put to market compared to a lot of the other craft brewers that were opening at that time.
Yeah, it was interesting when you came out. When I saw you guys with the lagers that came out, if there was a good lager, and if everybody said, "What's a good lager?" I would point them your way, because I love your lagers. They're awesome. And you did stand out, by doing that, so I think it was the right move. It's just everybody wants to do an IPA or an ale, and but lagers are special. So you have the training, and they're really coming out. They're delicious, actually. I have to come to your tap room. I haven't been there. I gotta. I'm in Portsmouth.
Gotta get down to Framingham. It's only like an hour away or so.
I gotta go. Yes, I gotta go. Too many excuses. Maybe tomorrow evening I'll grab somebody. I'm doing some work in Mass, so I'm gonna keep going and get to Framingham. Get some samples there. Awesome.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So. Obviously, it just keeps growing, the whole industry. I see a couple of breweries, that maybe kind of went too big, and they got caught, even regional. And what do you see in that? There was a couple of regional, even national, like they went nuts, and they went to all states, and they just went too big, and a lot of people are trending local.
Absolutely. Certainly local is huge right now, particularly in the beer business. There's some big examples of certain breweries that have had a rough go the past few years, but when you consider the sheer numbers, I think it's probably a pretty small percentage, and they're probably more they're not necessarily the main trend in the beer business. The main trend right now is certainly local. So if you focus on the local market, you're in a much stronger position right now. And there's definitely significant interest in just taproom business models right now, selling most of the beer out of the brewery. And that's when you talk about 7,000 breweries and maybe 10,000. I forget the exact numbers, but a vast majority of those breweries are making very small quantities of beer, so the numbers are hard to fully understand what that means for the overall industry, because maybe 90% of the breweries are making 1% of the beer in the U.S. or something like that. It's a pretty small volume, although you add it up over that many breweries, and it is a decent chunk. But it's not like there's 7,000, 50,000 barrel a year breweries that are opening. It's a little bit more nuanced than that when you think about how many breweries are opening and what that means for the market.
Yeah, it's becoming a lot more local, and I think that's the way. Well, in Germany, like every town has a brewery or a couple breweries, it used to be the case here pre-prohibition. There were a lot of local breweries serving to local people, and the margin on that is much better than doing cans and getting them out there, or maybe doing logs or even half barrels. Are like, man, everybody wants half barrels. It's best to just bring people into the tap room. So, and you built a massive, new tap room. What was your original one? Where was it? Was it in Framingham or?
Yeah, the original brewery, we didn't think anyone would come into the brewery, so we just had office space, and we kind of put a kegerator in it, and I believe it was about 200 square feet, maybe 300 square feet, and probably about 2 years in, we had to basically demo the offices, and we got up to about 500 square feet, and we built a bar, but we realized pretty quickly that there was a huge need for a tap room for on-premise beer sales, not only from the sales perspective, but from the marketing, branding perspective. We were able to talk to a lot of consumers, get feedback directly, and it certainly helped to it helped with the direction of new beers and how we were bringing beers to market, getting that direct feedback from people who were coming to the brewery.
Yeah, it's great to, get people into the brewery and have that brewer, beer lover, brewer connection. They love that stuff. Even when I go around, I try to sell kegs and stuff, or if I do tastings, they're like, "Oh my God, you own the company? Oh my God," they love it. Like you're going to come here and do a taste. I'm like, yeah.
It's a cool thing to actually know who's making anything for you these days. So you're for some reason beer has done this really well, is you're able to get that connection with the brewery, and it's important. And I think you see that in other industries as well, but for one reason or another, brewers have been exceptionally good at being available, being the face of their breweries, and being able to meet and greet and show their face around. And I think that there's a lot of value in that.
Absolutely. I think it just connecting with the public and the whole vibe and the whole energy is awesome. Tap rooms and just bringing people together. Too many times you just look at people, you stand there and look at them, and everybody's looking at their phone. Everybody's looking at their phone. Like if you go into any populated area, even on standing online waiting to pay for groceries, everybody's on their phone. So, which is a great thing. Now we know where people's focus is, right? It's on their phone and not on TV, and that could help with marketing. So I'm trying to figure the marketing part out. But it's good to just put the phone away and talk to somebody over a nice beer, and just get that human connection again. So I think beer does that. It brings people together. When people are sad, go ahead.
It was certainly one of the focuses when we opened the new brewery about 3 or 4 years ago. I get my math is a little not so great right now, but when we opened the new facility, we really wanted to focus on the beer hall, being able to bring people to the brewery, And we certainly like that connection we have to our community here, and it's been real positive for the brewery, and we think for the town as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You opened in October 2015. I see here, and you have a huge 67,000 square foot space. Wow. And you got a big, massive brew house, 60 barrel?
Yeah, that's the Jack Savvy side, and then there's another 63,000 square feet that's Springdale as well. So it's 130,000 square feet of space.
Man.
It's a lot. You can get lost in this building at times.
My God.
It's a lot of space.
So getting into the Springdale, since you mentioned it, I see that you're barrel aging. Is that what your focus is on it? You're doing ales, not lagers there.
Yeah.
So you're brewing them on site there and then barrel aging them, or is that
right? So the focus of Springdale is basically ale fermentation, and that's we do clean fermentation. We do a number of IPAs, stouts. One of our flagships is a Belgian-style wheat beer, so we do a number of Belgian-style beers. But the real reason that we started Springdale was to focus a lot of our time and effort on wood aging beer. And we currently have 25,000 square feet of wood aging space. Wow. Which has approximately 2,500 barrels of beer aging right now in the wood.
Wow.
And we have a number of large format foeders and well over 1,200 wine/bourbon barrels that we're aging beer in. So it's a pretty big commitment on our end to creating sour beers for the most part.
And you're doing sour beers, yeah. So and how long would it age in the barrels? Like, what's your typical aging time?
It really varies. It depends on what sort of products we're making. A lot of our sour beers have some sort of fruit addition to them, so that takes extra time. But I would say on average, you're looking in the 9 to 18 month range, and probably 15 month is maybe the sweet spot for a lot of the beer that we're producing here. So the beer sits for a significant period of time before it's ready to package, which is why you need so much space to produce a fairly small amount of beer. We'll probably produce maybe 1,000 barrels of sour beer, but we're brewing that in 25,000 square feet, where on the Jack side, we're doing about 50,000 barrels of beer in 50,000 square feet. So you really need a lot of space per barrel of production when you're aging in wood for up to 2-3 years.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Barrel aging is awesome. I mean, we get barrels from Allagash. They get them from Jim Beam, and people love it here. Anything you put in these barrels is just delicious. Have you sold some of this yet? Or are you still aging it, or I'm not sure because it's pretty new, right?
We've started distribution over the winter, so we're about 8 to 10 months into distribution of the Springdale products. It's a little slow to get them out in the beginning. Just it takes a long time to build inventory and get product out. But we're starting to ramp up a lot of that production now. So you as far as New Hampshire goes, I think maybe the first shipment of sours is headed up your way, but most of the sour beer stays in Massachusetts or goes to New York. We haven't sent a lot of it to some of the other states, just because of the way that we've decided to roll these products out as just sort of a staggered release. So everyone in New England in our distribution network will get it eventually, but we've kind of had a slow rollout just to accommodate the beer that we have the ability to sell right now.
And you're getting it out in Mass and New York. Are they bottles and kegs, or how's that?
Yeah, so we do a little bit of draft of the sour product, and we do bottles as well. We do half-liter bottles. And Yeah, so we're doing a lot of part of the reason it takes an additional amount of time to get the sour products is a lot of them are bottle conditioned, so we have to wait up to 2-3 months for the beer to re-ferment in the bottle once it's been packaged.
Wow, that's a process. Wow. But it sounds interesting. And they have a tasting room too?
Yeah, so Springdale has its own tasting room. It doesn't have the food component like the Jack's beer hall, the Jack's Heavy Beer Hall, but we have games, we have a dedicated sour beer tap facility, so we have a warmer, we have 2 temperature controlled spaces for the different products, colder space for our clean beers like our IPAs and Belgian beers, and a warmer temperature service for some of our sour beers, and plenty of seating as well. So it's the whole space is open, so you can kind of feel like you're part of the barrel aging process because you're sitting right next to all the barrels.
The open space is very popular, and people like to be part of the brewery. You know, like the brewery's there, and then they'll have the tap room, but it's all open. And it's
Absolutely.
Great. Yeah, I've seen some pictures of it too. It looks great. Wow, and that's right next to. So they're right next to each other, the Jack's Abbey and then the Springdale.
Yeah, so there's 2 separate buildings that are connected via just an alleyway that the public can't get through. So for the public, it's 2 separate spaces. For employees, you can get between the 2 buildings. And you had mentioned a little bit before about how we brew for Springdale. Most of what Springdale is just a fermentation area. So we'll brew the beer on the Jack's brew house, but we have piping that goes over to the Springdale side, and we'll pump the beer from the Jack side to the Springdale side.
So in terms of like Massachusetts looking at you, it's like one brewery. Is that what it is, or?
So technically, we are one brewery because we have one brewery license, and we have 2 brands, and each brand has its own space here.
It's the brand, yeah. All right. Yeah. No, very interesting. Yeah. I mean, ales are, and then I see here that you're in 16-ounce cans now.
Absolutely. So for the Jack side, we sell canned products. We do 16-ounce 6-packs and 4-packs. Depends if it's a year-round beer or a specialty beer, and we do 12-ounce for our year-round beers as well. And the Jack side is definitely the majority of our production. So we're probably 95% Jack's production and 5% Springdale production right now.
And you have a new one in cans, the Blood Orange Wheat. I guess it's very popular.
Blood Orange Wheat. Yeah, so that's one of our new beers for this year. It's sort of inspired by a Radler, which is a mix of beer and soda, which is very popular in Germany. Radler translates to cyclist. So it's sort of what I guess was created to give bikers. So it's not quite as strong as a beer, but it still has alcohol in it. So that's sort of our take on a Radler by combining beer and blood orange together.
Interesting.
So
and it's a low, like a 4% ABV. Yeah.
Yeah, it's 4% ABV, so it's on the lower side, and it's really sort of an ideal summer drink because it is quite light, fruity, and it's always one of the best sellers in the beer hall year round. But certainly from a distribution standpoint, it works better for the summer.
Yeah, I really liked your when I had the Harponius Union, like the India Pale Lager. I'm like, what's this thing? India Pale Lager. I know India Pale Ale, but I'm like, this is interesting, And I bought a 6-pack of it, and it was delicious, So really good hops.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. That was sort of our way of getting into the hoppy beer world before we had Springdale. We really wanted to have a hop-focused beer, so we decided to brew an IPL. I think that was the 4th or 5th beer that we produced, and that was the best seller for a number of years. The day that was released, I think it was our best seller for our first 4 or 5 years. It's since transitioned a little bit. House lagers are our bestseller now, which is German style Helles. But we think that there's a lot of benefits to having dry hop lagers. I think that they give you the same sort of hop aroma and flavor that you would look for in an IPA. They just tend to drink a little cleaner and are a little bit, even if they're not lower in alcohol, they drink a little lighter and easier because of the lager fermentation.
That's what I noticed too. It was nice, smooth, clean, really nice. Yeah, very good. And the lager too. Your lager is great as well. So, how many states do you distribute? Right? How many states are you in now?
We're in the Northeast, so we're in New York and New England. We do a little bit of beer in Philly, but we're not in the whole state of Pennsylvania. But we're trying to focus basically where you can drive your car in a few hours, and we kind of call that our local market. So basically nowhere that takes more than 6 hours to get your car to at this point.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great idea. Instead of expanding all over the country, and a lot of breweries are pulling back. They went nuts, and
absolutely,
some breweries,
it's definitely a challenge on the distribution, and even in your local market, as strong as local beer is, there's still a lot of competition. But the further you get away from your home market, the harder it is to sell beer. So it's something that we've noticed, we've seen, and we're working. That's part of the reason we stay as close to the brewery as we do. We don't really have interest in going further away from the markets we're already in.
Well, yeah, if you could keep local. I mean, if you go far flung, and then you got to have salespeople that are there, and then they have to convince people, because everything's like trending local now. And they're like, what is this? Like if you're in, I don't know, say Florida or something, and like, oh, this is a brewery in Massachusetts. All right, that's great. They want local stuff.
It is interesting because Florida's interesting because it used to be a great market for the Northeast brewers because so many people would vacation in Florida that a lot of these brewers were able to do well. And now that there is a really strong local brewing community, it's not as easy. Yeah. But you don't even need to look that far to see issues. I remember being at one place in it was in Kittery, I believe, and they wouldn't serve beer from Portsmouth because they didn't consider it local beer. And I'm like, you can actually see Portsmouth. I know it's a different state, but it's actually these other breweries are probably closer in distance than any of the other beer that you're selling here. So I think that there's sort of like extremes here where we're going to have to find the right balance. What is local? Is local a distance? Is it a state? Is it, a region? But I think these things are sort of just playing themselves out right now. Everyone's sort of experimenting and seeing what works for them.
Yeah, Maine is, Maine beer is Maine beer, and Mainers like Maine beer. So, but there's a load of beer up in Maine. It's exploded, especially the Portland area, and yeah. It's the whole industry. So what do you think about the craft beer industry in general? I think you said that, when you started, you had several thousand breweries, and now it's like triple that, right? You think this trend is going to, you think it's going to keep going, or it's going to level out, or what do you see?
If you pay attention to the Brewers Association, they believe that they track TTB licenses and they track brewery openings, and they found in the past decade or so that the number of TT brewery permits usually trails about 2 years brewery openings. So even though there's 7,000 breweries, only 7,000 breweries open, there's actually 10,000 permitted breweries. So the Brewers Association assumes that there's another 3,000 breweries that will likely open their doors in the next 2 years. So that's another almost 50% on top of the 300% that we've seen in the past decade.
Wow.
It certainly begs the question whether or not it's sustainable. And I just don't know what that point is. At some point, like any industry, there's a tipping point, and I think we're probably getting pretty close. But again, I've thought we've been at that tipping point for 7 years, and I've been wrong for the last 7 years.
Like you said, it's I haven't looked at the graph lately, like graph of breweries opening. I'm sure it's pretty steep, or it's getting steeper. But it's the same thing like the housing bubble. Like you look at the graph, it's like, trending along, going up nicely, and all of a sudden it just spikes. And I'm like, this can't happen like forever. Something's got to happen, and it did. It corrected, massively, and a lot of people got caught in it. But I think a lot.
You saw the correction in the craft beer industry in the late '90s, early 2000s. That was a pretty dramatic decline. Certainly, the craft beer industry is prone to this issue. So I think you're going to see an issue, but timing's really going to be important. The second part is who's going to have the biggest issues. Because if most of these guys that are opening now are really small and doing just tap room, they may certainly be fine. It may be breweries that are older that depend more on the distribution model that have more issues, or have a very large distribution footprint that are the most caught up in any decline that happens.
I think a lot of the bigger breweries, the big giants are, very nervous now, I guess, because all these breweries that are popping up and taking share away. You could see the pie is slowly deteriorating for them. They still have a massive chunk of it, but there are breweries that are popping up and stepping up. And a lot of people are demanding, local beers. So,
I think you're right. You look at just the trend in brewery sales, and it was so many breweries were selling 2-3 years ago, and you really haven't heard of too many breweries selling recently. And I think that is a interesting phenomenon where even the big brewers like Bud and Miller and Constellation, they're not exactly sure where craft beer is going, and they're worried about getting burned on sales too. So I think you're seeing a lot of people who have been in an industry and know the industry well being very concerned about future trends and a little bit pessimistic on the next few years of growth.
I know. I'm just the 3-tier system is just so antiquated, and we're trying to. I mean, we self-distribute, but we're a small brewery, but still, the distributors is kind of like you got to do what they want. And you have a bunch of different distributors, or do you have one network?
I'm a little bit of a different perspective on that. I think the 3-tier system is one of the few reasons why we've been why craft beer has been so successful. If you think about tied houses, I mean, you go to Germany and the beer is fantastic, but you can only find one beer in any restaurant, and they're all tied into a brewery. So it becomes really hard. If you're going to open a brewery in Germany, how do you sell your beer? Every restaurant has a contract with another brewery to sell their beer. So there's no outlet. That's why you don't hear about. Part of the reason there's not a lot of breweries opening in Germany is that there's no access to market except from your own facilities. So, in some ways, it works out well where at least we have access, even if it's really challenging. But the 3-tier system does, in many ways, has allowed what's going on to happen. Is the distribution model perfect? Absolutely not. But I think it gets a worse rap than it should.
Maybe it's my personal experience shining through. I had like 2 distributors. I had one originally, which was great. We were banging it out, get the beer out there, and they give me a nice check. And then we had another distributor that bought them out, and that was kind of like, it didn't work out too well.
Again, I'm not saying that individual circumstances are great. Yeah. I'm just saying in general, as a macro version, a macro perspective on how beer gets to market in the U.S. is incredibly better than most other markets. And I've heard horror stories about brewers and distributors, and there's a lot of times where that relationship does not work out, and there's a lot of some of the issues are you can't get out of these contracts in many times. That's where you can see where the system really breaks down. And certainly where my brother's part of the Mass Brewers Guild, and that's one of the top priorities, is to help to negotiate distributor agreements that we think are more reasonable in the event that relationships between brewers and distributors don't work out, which sometimes they do. You can't expect every relationship in a business setting to work, but there's no real mechanism to end a poor relationship between brewers and distributors. Certainly would be the biggest issue with how our system is set up.
Yeah, I mean, well, for your size, I guess it works. I guess the smaller breweries, it might not work, but it just depends on the brewery and how, like you said, the contracts. Sometimes they make you sign contracts and you can't get out of them, and then you're like frozen.
Yeah, it's not even necessarily the contract. A lot of state law doesn't allow for it, even if you sign a contract that says that you can leave a distributor. Often state law prohibits you from leaving the distributor, even if there's a contract in place. So, again, there's a lot of situations where these relationships don't work out and they aren't ideal. But I think in many situations they've actually allowed for some pretty significant access to markets that aren't available in other countries.
Right. Have you found any pushback from maybe the bigger beer guys, big beer conglomerates regarding maybe shelf space? Or I know you guys are making a lot of beer, but have you had any experience with that? Or
yeah, I mean, absolutely. Everyone's fighting for the same shelf space. I don't think it's like anything specifically against us, but the more sales guys you have and the more POS you have, point of sales items, and the more support you can give any account, the better odds you have of getting a strong placement or getting more floor space or getting even potentially a better price point. And a lot of that's related to rate of sale, but these guys aren't just going to go down quietly. They're kicking and fighting. They're trying to they're trying to make sure they're staying relevant. And
absolutely,
as much as their sales are hurting, they're not giving up. They see a long-term vision for selling Bud, for selling Corona, for selling any of these other bigger brands that, Constellation's maybe a different story. They're still growing pretty good, but any of these bigger guys who are seeing declines in sales, they want those sales. They're working hard to get them back.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole premise of me starting this whole podcast. I keep going into stores and I see like 90% of the beer section, like this big beer, and it is because of the service and they have the money. But a lot of people just just don't know that there's like local craft beer available. And that's kind of what we're trying to, spread the word about and have people on like you. You're kind of a regional brewery, a smaller brewery. I mean, you're only in New England.
I think your point is why tap rooms have become so popular and so relevant. If you really want access to a lot of the beers, sometimes you just have to go to the brewery. I think that there's an interesting catch-22 for retailers. I know a lot of retailers aren't necessarily as enthusiastic with having so many tap rooms open, but on the flip side, if there's not ability to sell beer at retail, there's not a lot of options for a small brewer. So there's got to be that balance between the being able to get your beer in market and also the ability to how much beer you're selling from your own place.
Right. So it is a balance. It's just interesting. The whole industry is kind of in flux, and like every day you see these mergers and what's happening. And we did
with big beer is really big beer right now. It's one of the largest companies in the world is SAB Miller, AB InBev Miller, whatever their thing is called now. It's what, $100 billion merger. It's a big company that controls not just a lot of the U.S. market, but controls the world market
worldwide.
In many ways. So
yeah. So
it's not even access to beer for consumers. It gets into access to raw materials for hops and barley, and they can, or say cans, for example, it can alter complete levels of, when you think about beer, but what does it take to make beer? They can control it from seed to finished product at this point, and there's that potential to really wreak havoc on craft beer, just on potentially controlling the barley crop or controlling the hop crop or controlling anything else in between. Can shortages right now, and I'm not blaming anyone for the can shortages, but that you could just see that it's a fragile marketplace right now, and there's the potential to really be disruptive at the size that they are.
I know, and I'm hoping that does not happen, but I think, like you said, they're kicking and screaming, and if worse comes to worse, I think that's what's probably going to happen. They're going to start squeezing the markets. Barley prices are going to start to go up. There's probably...
Yeah, the interesting thing for InBev is that while the U.S. market is not doing well for them, they're incredibly profitable. Their other markets are growing like crazy. So, there's always that question: do they just sort of focus on where they're making money, or do they want to, how much time and effort are they going to put into being disruptive in the U.S. market when they have record profits that they're pulling in right now?
Yeah, that remains to be seen. Remains to be seen. So we'll see how much. But I keep seeing that pie shrinking for them every year, which is good. It's ticking down. So. There's a place for big beer. You're at a ball game and stuff like that. And you want to drink a beer, and
absolutely.
And people like beer. I'm not going to tell them not to drink if they really like the beer. Then that's fine. But I'm just trying to introduce them to some new, local beer or styles. Now I just started another podcast, another segment on beer styles. So I did my first one this week about wheat beer. Like people don't understand wheat, and they're like, everybody's scared about gluten, right? I'm like, yes, we are gluten lovers. We're carnivores. We put bacon in our beer, and sorry, So, yep. But I don't know. Anyway, and what would you say, like, to wrap it up? Like, why should people drink local brew? Keep it local. You're kind of a regional, but you're still local. I mean, you're a New England brewery. Why do you
why drink our beer? Well, I mean, certainly come to the brewery, and we think we'd like to show you around, give you the tour, and give you the ability to try all our beers. The best part of having the tap room, having the restaurant here, is our connection to our community and being able to host people, show people around, and explain who we are, why we do what we do. And that's been a great for us, and being able to see all these people enjoying our beer, getting that feedback, has been some of the best experiences of running this brewery for the last 7 years.
Yeah, it makes you feel good that you do stuff for local and use local products. And do you use any other local products in your beer, like honey or something, or maple syrup?
So we use local malt from Valley Malt. We're about to start getting malt from a new maltster in Wareham called Stone Path. We do buy a number of fruit products in the late summer, fall for beers. We bought peaches and nectarines, grapes, and plums locally for some of our sour beers in particular. And hello?
Yeah.
Did I lose you there?
Nope.
I'm sorry. I thought the phone cut out there.
Nope.
And we've used honey in the past as well. So we do our best to use ingredients as we can based on what's available. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of barley grown in this area. Most of it's grown either in the Midwest or in
Right.
Europe, and same for hops. Are kind of mainly grown in the Pacific Northwest and in Europe as well.
It's just
but
the climate.
we're able
Yeah.
to access other ingredients locally.
Yeah. So, but that's great. You're using local, and that's what we're promoting. Have people go out, not just local beer, but local food, and supporting your local business. It's important,
Absolutely.
for community, and I think it's great. Yeah. So, hey, I'd like to thank you for coming in. I appreciate your beer. You guys are killing it. It's fantastic. Just keep hearing good things from people about your beers, and you're spreading out. It's more accessible to have your beers. And
absolutely, glad you're enjoying.
Yeah, it's really good stuff. So I appreciate you being on, and I got to get down to the tap room. I got to figure it out. I'll be down.
Sounds good.
All right, Jack, I appreciate you being on, and take care.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That was good stuff from Jack at Jack's Abbey. Great brewery. They're making really great stuff. Started out with lagers, which was interesting when everybody else was making ales. They went out and they did the lagers, and they were very successful, and they're still successful today. They've expanded tremendously, and I see their product all over the place here in the Northeast. And if you like this podcast, if you like what we're doing, please subscribe. We're on iTunes. Subscribe, leave a review, leave a rating. That's the only thing that's going to help us get the podcast out there into the general public. iTunes looks at these things, and I don't ask anything else, but just please go on and write a review, rating, and subscribe. And, we'll keep bringing you the content. We've got a couple of other heavy hitters lined up. Hopefully they come through, and we'll get those out to you as we move along. But I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you listening to our podcast here, Craft Beer Storm. And remember that there is an alternative to watered down, mass-produced beer, and that is local, beautiful craft beer. So get out there and support your local brewery. Go into their local restaurant. If they don't have any local beers on tap, grab the manager, grab them by the shoulders and say, what's wrong with you? You need to give them a tap line, and get your local brewery on tap at your local restaurant. That's the only thing to do. That's the right thing to do. Okay, guys, we'll see you till next time.